Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the usual stream for writing a programming language in Rust, writing the Ash programming language, and it has been quite quite a while since since I've been streaming. So excited to be getting stuck back into it. I've been looking at a bunch of, let me see, I've got to authenticate here actually for the chat. But it's been, yeah, quite a while since I was streaming, but excited to be getting stuck back in. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I've been revisiting where I left off, which is the error handling and error throwing, actually. So now that I look at it, the title of today's channel is error catching, but it's actually to do with error throwing, because we have the basic error catching mechanism in place, which is a single question mark prefix, which will catch any error and then convert it into a two-element list, where this basically Go style error catching, but with a more lightweight syntax. Because this is a scripting language, so a quick recap of the project. So this is intended to be a scripting language as primarily an alternative to Bash scripting. So keeping a lot of, hopefully, the ergonomics of, oh, I see that. The one-time passcode got shown on screen, but yeah, thankfully that's been entered already. But the idea here is that the, what's it called? The language will be an alternative to Bash scripting. So keeping the ergonomics of Bash, but with a C style syntax, so that it will, in general, hopefully be easier to use. And a further consequence of this, which I've been thinking a lot more recently, so naturally in the last number of months and years, realistically, there's been such an explosion in terms of AI and LLM use, and the use of LLMs in programming contexts. For example, Claude is such a ubiquitous tool and is very useful for architecting code quite quickly and to quite a high standard. And at that point, it kind of begs the question, if we even need more programming languages in general. Do we want languages that are going to be more catered to AI use? And do we want to, is there benefit in writing a language like this if the LLMs that are out there are already trained on quite a lot of Bash scripts already? And while this is true, and I'll be talking a bit more about this on a subsequent stream, the thing is, I do think there are a lot of benefits to a language like this. So it is going to be borrowing heavily from Go in terms of its ideas about simplicity, and from Python in a similar fashion. And even those two benefits are on their own, in addition to the mm, the shall we say, yeah, decision to go with a C style syntax, I feel will actually lend itself to a language that's a lot easier for LLMs to use compared to Bash, and make it easier for actually both humans and LLMs to do the right thing when it comes to using it, which I think is another benefit of the approach that Go uses, in creating a language that's easier. At least some of the initial early goals for Go was that, and I think it still carries to this day, is that for Google, they wanted new employees to be able, especially new graduates and junior developers, to be able to upskill quickly and learn Go in a language that makes it difficult to, shall we say, shoot yourself in the foot and doesn't have as steep of a learning curve as, say, something like Java, where Java is still a lot easier than a lot of other languages, especially ones that preceded it that were a lot more low level. When it came to Go, it made it easier to, like, there were much fewer, shall we say, language constructs to think about and to even use. So in a way, it was less expressive at times and less flexible, but actually the simplicity of it and the way it focused on really composable elements and focused on what are actually the real things we need for being productive and really focused in on those, made a language that is, I think, easier for more junior developers to actually use, and as a consequence makes it, I think, quite a useful language for LLMs to use and to generate code in. Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for joining. As long as I don't take Go's date formatting. Yeah, well, the target here is actually that that it's going to be a language focused on the command line, so mostly composing different programs together. So it's actually going to focus less on, shall we say, more general purpose programming ideas such as that. So instead of providing raw date formatting primitives in this language and libraries for that, I mean, there will be library capability, so anyone can write whatever libraries they want, but it'll be using the date formatting from programs and things like that. Though that is probably one of my, I would say, medium takes. I actually don't mind the date formatting in Go too much. There are a lot of things that I think were quite poor decisions in terms of Go date formatting. Actually don't mind too much, and in a way it like the standard date formatting format strings that are in a lot of other languages, I feel like I always need to look them up in general anyway. So, but that's my mild take on that. And thanks for the question, Buffett Codes. So the language doesn't use LLVM at the moment, and the focus really at the start was actually just to get something working. So I kind of borrowed some, not skeleton code, but I used other projects as a reference to get the project off the ground. And they didn't use LLVM, so I just used a parser generator called LALRPOP in Rust, and just went with that. It is something that I want to integrate at some point, but I also need to look at all of those options in general when it comes to, because ideally I'd like to be able to write, for example, an LSP, or at least make it easy to write an LSP in the language. And different parser generators will be better for that than others. And so that is potentially a whole area that I'll have to look into eventually, but at least the language and the evaluation is defined on the abstract syntax tree. So it will hopefully mean that I can change the backend without hopefully too much difficulty, but we'll see. Yeah, and that's a good point, Mod Product. I kind of like the fact that when you look at it, you kind of see a sample of what the actual result is going to be. But I suppose the fact that it uses, say, 0, 1 and 0, 2 and things like that, if you swap them, it's not obvious that actually it's swapping the date and, or the date and month. But yeah. It's also a thing that doesn't come up too often for me, so it's not too much of an issue. And so, yeah, thanks for the questions, Buffett Codes. So the language is actually fairly well fleshed out, I would say, at this stage. So it has, if I were to open up, say, one of the test files that contains the features for the language. So, and even actually, we have a doc here of features. So, there's, yeah, grammar expressions, interpreter defined, and most of the, shall we say, I base this off a base language, shall we say, called Seed. And the idea there was that it was going to be a mix of fairly uncontroversial design decisions in terms of language. So just had all the basics, control flow, kind of basic JavaScript types, because I like the simplicity of that. And then just kind of came short of defining the more advanced features like import, error handling, and things like that. And that's now what I'm implementing into this language to really give it its defining qualities. So, for example, we have special mutability functionality in this language. So, which is a little different for a scripting language, I would say. Things are immutable by default, but again, very lightweight mechanisms to actually make things mutable. And I think that's beneficial in shell scripts where they're not going to be tested too often. So I think making it easy to have sensible defaults and strong defaults from the start, including very strong types in the same way as Python, I think is very valuable, so that you can, without too much testing, you can find errors early, and then once it runs once well enough, then it's going to generally work well enough after that. So it borrows a lot from Python in terms of philosophies, but then actually borrows a lot from JavaScript in terms of basic data types and object structures, object definitions, but tries to address a lot of the what I would see as shortcomings of JavaScript, such as variable scoping, the way that this is handled, like this keyword and all those kind of things. And it actually has a lot, and also even splitting up the namespace between, for example, the the namespace used for actual type methods, which are defined in this language, versus object. When you look up an object on, or a property on an object, typically you'll actually be getting that that property and that you defined, and not one that's built into the language. For example, you don't need to mess around with has own property and things like that. So lots of comments here, so I'll try and keep up. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks very much for the support, and yeah, we'll be delighted to see more people getting involved and being interested in this, and yeah, seeing what we can build with it. Because I don't know, I've been picking up a bit of steam with it recently, even though I've paused it for a while. I feel like the ideas that are in it and the way they've combined quite organically have given me a lot of motivation. I've been a little stuck on the error throwing mechanism recently, and actually just today I was going to be streaming anyway, but just before the stream I kind of not cracked it, but came up with at least a syntax that I'm very happy with at the moment. We'll see how it actually works in terms of yeah, in terms of the grammar here in particular, because that's as you can see on the right, I'm kind of continuing on where I left off in the last stream, which was I was trying to add in a special syntax for error throwing, because I thought it was going to be difficult to extend the language in the way that I wanted. So the error, I have a big errors.txt file that I was going to use to explain how yeah, all the different design decisions going into what this mechanism could look like. I actually have another separate, very long file with with just like a total brain dump of what the syntax could look like. And up until recently, I was looking at this kind of an idea. So it was going to be like in general, it was just error handling was just going to, or error throwing was just going to look like this. So errors in general are going to be singletons, but there's going to be flexibility to make it more flexible if you need it. But again, we're scripting here. So most of the time we just want to say this thing happened, with hopefully a relatively unique name for the thing that happened. And then we can get more sophisticated if we need it. So for example, if we're doing a login on the command line for whatever reason, and there's a specific type of error that comes up that we want to handle, then we can give more details and context into that, but then everything else just uses the basics, but also keeps a stack trace. I'm again pleased with how that's looking in the current designs, so I'm excited to share that soon. But I was looking at this because it was going to need what I thought was it's like a special syntax sugar, so that we could make error construction easier. What I'm actually thinking is we just use strings for the errors, and that's because as I've been breaking it down, what an error in this language will essentially be is just an object, but with certain fields predefined. So a little bit of duck typing from Python. So if it has these error fields, then it is an error in this language. And what are those error fields in this language? Well, at its core, the only two real fields that it needs are, number one, a name, which has to be a string, and then function property, which has to be an actual function in the language. And so that can be, I think, quite useful because it will allow us to throw the same identifier from different functions, but we can actually see if we want to match a lower level function. This allows us to distinguish between them. So for example, if I have a function that was called read config, and it had some part where it said, the condition failed. This is just pseudo code, not the actual language code at the moment. In fact, let's just wrap it in that just to make it a bit more natural. So if some condition failed and we want to throw, so using the old syntax, we would say not found. And then later on in read config was going to do a call to open file. Then within open could also have a condition here that looks exactly the same, has the same signature. And so how do we distinguish between those? And that can sometimes, it's possible to get around this in, say, the likes of JavaScript, where if you want to do error handling correctly, you can define specific classes, and you can do instance of and all these kind of things to make sure that the error that you're looking at is the one that you're actually interested in. In this language, I want to again make it a little more lightweight because it is for scripting rather than actually building big programs. So if I wanted to catch something like that, I could say, for example, conf error is equal to, and this double question mark is for catching an error and actually keeping the error information. So I could go read config file, and what I would say here is if error matches, and this is a type method, so it's different to it's not actually accessing a property of the error object, because error at this point is just a regular object with specific fields set. And so I could say if it matches open dot throw, that will match this specific one, or if I said read config dot throw, then it would match this one. And so I think that is a really nice idea. And we can let those out entirely and just pass a string in here. Now, in general, the language tries to avoid having polymorphism on types because it just is. If you avoid polymorphism, it's just easier to catch errors. And again, if you make things too flexible, like you do in the likes of PHP, where sometimes, depending on the operation you perform, it will just coerce. I can't even remember. Maybe it's a coalesce operation. I can't remember. It's been a while since I did PHP, but it tries to make it into the thing that will work for that operation. But that generally, if you're trying to do an operation on two things that aren't really compatible, you should just throw an error. And that is something that I'm going to have to reason about still, but that's the general idea. So coming back to the actual error object, we're going to have name function. There's going to be a stack. I'm very excited as to how that will look because I've got some ideas around that too. And then the rest of this object will just be context information. I decided to put it in the root rather than putting it into its own property. And then I think there might be one more element. Oh yes, so there's the sources. So this is a list of other errors that were instrumental in this error further along the stack. So going back to where we were looking at this syntax sugar for my error. This syntax sugar for creating errors, but we don't actually, I think, really need a new syntax for this. This is one operation that, and first of all, that's where this came up out of. I was trying to define this new piece of syntax, but adding in this and trying to add in optional context at the end of it was proving. Well, I was also looking at putting the that's not an ampersand, that is an at symbol, I suppose. I was looking at putting it after the identifier in order to resolve conflicts, but none of that was working. So I'm actually going to look at, where is it? Instead, having a new option here where we say that instead of having an identifier, we have a string literal, and it's not an interpreted string literal. Now, this will kind of be the moment of truth, because if this isn't first I'll just remove the old code and double check that the conflict is resolved and that we can build. Oh yeah, and that'd be really cool, Modprog. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what people think of it. I do a lot of DevOps work lately, and so that kind of, and I also kind of wanted to write a programming language, so it followed naturally. But I'm kind of the same. I use Bash for most of my scripts still, just because it is, I think, still the most fit for purpose. The other alternatives out there I haven't quite gelled with the approach that they've taken, and there are a lot of languages in this space, and I've been finding about some more recently as well. But I've seen a lot of alternatives that try to keep the structure of Bash, which I understand, because it is quite ergonomic. I mean, you just write the the name of the program followed by the arguments, and it's kind of as simple as you get. But I do think there's a lot of benefits to just keeping things familiar with a C-style syntax. So I think this is just to do with it not matching. Yeah, I think it's just because there's a new type of token. I need to update an error message. But the language itself is compiling. That's just error message stuff. So what we'll do next is we'll update this and say, what was it called? String literal. Now we'll have to change name here potentially. But at least in terms of seeing if there's a conflict, we'll take a look. Yeah, I was interested in fish as well, but yeah, similar to what you're saying. Okay, so that's very promising, and it looks like it actually kind of just worked. So if we replace this with our new error construct, then in fact it won't even be a new error construct. We'll just be creating a new object. But yeah, we'll dive into that. But yeah, I've looked into fish myself as well. That is something that I think that Bash and Fish somewhat suffer from as well, in that they try to be two things, which is very useful in some ways, but I do think it's kind of tricky to define a shell and a programming language in one. It does enable a lot of cool things, but I think, to me, the idea of having a language dedicated to doing language stuff makes a lot of sense. Plus, I didn't see a huge amount in Fish that would make me use it over Bash, if that made sense. I kind of like I even do a lot of shell scripting in I use Bash more than SH. But I do try to keep things as POSIX compliant and kind of portable as possible as well. But yeah, exactly. The for loop, I mean, like at this stage, because I've just done so many Bash scripts at this point, it is kind of second nature, and I know all the gotchas, but like that was a tough hill to climb. And even doing, like, I'm good with, which is crazy to say, I'm good at doing if statements, and I'm good at doing, I would say, while loops maybe in Bash. Not that you probably want to do that too often, but yeah, doing something like a for loop is still like, it wouldn't come off the top of my head. But it's good that this syntax is now allowing us to proceed. So what we'll do, yeah, that brings us on to our next question then, which is exactly how we should represent this. So it is going to be syntactic sugar. So whether we use that to create an AST object here, that probably makes the most sense. But we'll try that first, and then we can modify as we go along if we need to. So the expression here, yeah, and the location. And then we have, let's see, although it doesn't have expression here, it has props. And then the lines where the props are defined. So they'll all, yeah, that'll be interesting. What we'll do is start with this. So we'll have a vector of props. And the first prop will be, so it has to be a prop item. What is that? Yeah, and that's actually very much in line with what I was thinking as well, in terms of using the shell scripting language in the terminal versus as the language construct, because I think Bash probably is the most ergonomic language for the shell, but in the shell you're also not going to use a lot of constructs that you use in a script, especially when you're coming to things like by the time you're using more advanced constructs, you should be writing a script rather than doing it all just on a single terminal line as well, is the feeling I get. But let's see. So we need a prop item here. And it can be a pair or a single. So a pair is when, or a single is when you just have the expression that is going to be used for both the name and the value. And so we probably want to have a pair here. And so the name in this case is going to be an expression. And so that should be because that gets evaluated. Can I turn the string literal into an expression? And how best would I do that? So that creates a raw expression. It does that there too. And then normal expression is just a raw expression with a location, I guess. Where is expression defined? Oh yeah, there. Yeah, it's a raw expression with a location. Oof. That's rough. But yeah, partly satisfying, partly frustrating, but also satisfying to actually, when it actually clicks and it's not just like it's the, cosmic rays doing something weird. Let's see, the name string literal, to convert that into a raw expression, we'll do it like this. And then I guess the location, we'll have a couple of items going in here. How do I format these kind of multi-statement expressions? I do it like that. Okay. I'll put a space here. So the location will go name location. And so this will be the only property to begin with. But we'll probably be adding more name or more properties. Well, we'll be adding more properties shortly, but let's just leave it as is until then. Is mutable. That's an interesting question. I would say, yeah, I mean, in general, things are going to be immutable by default, and you add a prefix when you're creating the object to make it mutable. Yeah, I think in this case, if you want to make it mutable, you have to create a new object from, which is, again, very easy to do with a lightweight syntax. So let's take this approach. So I think for I'm kind of, okay, no, I'll focus on the error at hand because I want to address the error that had been happening in the unit test, but let's get this building first. S wasn't found in scope, that's correct, so we'll just call this name. Missing value. Oh, sorry, this should be name. And the value is now name. Let's try that. Ooh. The compile times are going to be only getting bigger from here on out as the grammar gets bigger. So let's see, expect a string, so we need to, this section is getting quite deeply nested and it's only going to be getting more so, but I think this is the most sensible approach. Otherwise, we create a new AST object, AST node type, and I don't think there's a massive reason for that because it is just syntax sugar. So let's see. Name, raw expression. Oh, interesting. The object name. Okay, it's saying that expected. Oh, because those don't. Oh, those are expressions on their own. They don't need to be in boxes. So let's not put them in boxes. They can be who they want to be. Let's try that. And that should resolve both of those issues. And yeah, that was the other error that I was wanting to address just because a new token got added. And if I get rid of, if I just comment it out for the moment, then that should hopefully address that. There seems to be a warning that it is somewhere else. Oh, there. Just unused. Oh, maybe I'll put it back and just deal with the warning for the time being, because I kind of want to actually implement this and show some demos of it. And one thing I forgot to add to my Scratch file is, have I forgotten it again? Because I thought of it earlier and I forgot again what I wanted to add here. No, it's gone. It was something to do with catching. Oh, was it to do with language errors are going to be catchable? Because I was thinking about it before. I guess there are going to be different levels of language error in general. But, and I was thinking before that some of them are going to be okay, well, if there's a syntax error in your file, or if it's a syntax style error that's caught at the parsing stage or at the runtime evaluation stage, then that's a language error and it crashes the program. But realistically, when you're programming at scale, you might be importing it, like, again, this language is focused on generally smaller, more targeted scripts, but you know, there's always the possibility that we'll want to import from other languages, import modules, things like that. And if we call a function there and that can crash the program, even though it's maybe an optional thing, that's not so great. So maybe we actually do make all errors catchable at that stage, and then that way, yeah, our programs can be a little more robust and a little more reliable. Because again, this is intended for scripts that aren't going to be, I would say, thoroughly tested. They're mostly going to be focused on just the happy path, not handling every single edge case. So I think that's the most pragmatic approach. And so with that in mind, I thought removing the new identifier or the new token would resolve this issue. So what's going on here exactly? Okay, it's allowing, okay, so it's just that. Oh, is it the order of them changed? It looks like it. I'm not really sure how that's making a difference, but what I'll do actually is I'm just going to delete that test for the time being. And we'll just say exit code. Oof, I'm not sure. Because it has to be an exact match. Maybe I'll just remove the file for the moment. And so, nice, all other tests are passing. So with that in mind, let's take a look at okay, so we'll have error objects. And so we'll define a function f. And if we print f dot name, that should my error. That should look like that. Oh, and because it's a new file, it's not being picked up by ENTR. So I just need to restart that. Can I just run the error objects tests? Yeah, that seems to work as expected. It was just missing some syntax or some formatting. Oh, I don't love that, the way that gets printed. But it passes the test. That can be fixed later anyway. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create a new branch for this so that we can actually implement this iteratively. I think that's, oh yeah, just some reformatting. Where is our new? Where's the new code? Did I? No, it's, oh, it's up at the top here. So I need to split this one. And is that following our linting rules? No, not at the moment. So I need to fix the linting issues just to proceed. Oh, and I will actually need to address the use of at, just so that the rest of our linters can actually proceed. Commented out code. A bit too much of a stickler. But no, I don't mind that. I think I was going to be removing most of these anyway. Where is that expression? Well, what we'll do now that we have name and value working here, we can do the same with the actual function. Now, part of this will need to get evaluated. Or at least the validation of this will need to be handled during the evaluation step, because the expression on the left-hand side has to evaluate to a function. And so the name here is fn, and the value is expression. I probably don't need the location at the start here. Oh, I probably will, because even though it says expression here, it's probably raw expression. Yeah. And we'll call that fn expression. And that means we're also going to have to update our test. I think it's done in alphabetical order. Function sum f. So that's an interesting feature now as well. I guess that leads us to a bit of a tangent point and a type method that I want to implement as well for functions, which is a reflective type method that will return the name of the function. Now, whether that will take us down a major detour, we'll have to see, but I guess as it stands, that is not necessarily a blocker, but I don't like that way that it gets printed. Well, I can address how it gets printed first, and then I can add in the type method. So for print, where is print defined? It would be in built-ins. And where is the definition for functions? So if it's a built-in function and it's not a built-in function, then it gets the name. Now, why would it be sum? Why is the function name optional? Oh, because it could be anonymous, of course. So it doesn't need to be present. So let's see. So if it's like that, otherwise we'll do that. So if it's something, otherwise it will be what? Maybe we do it like this. Nice. That is looking the way we want it. So we'll put that in a commit of its own. Update rendering for functions or function values. And so next what we want to do is look at, no, not that. Oh, it's the same as before. I keep missing it. There we go. We'll split that. We'll accept that, not that. And now that we've, will we add in the documentation now? No, I think I'll add it at the end. So let's see, before the branch gets merged. So let's see, we have, oops, I have a suggestion being made to me. Okay, how did I? Okay, so I keep the ampersand. And actually, I should run all the tests just to be sure. What's that last one? Okay, I can just replace the whole thing. And let's run all the tests. Nice. And so what will we tackle for the next bit? So we'll allow sources. Well, there's possibly some stuff that we can play around with even just this much, but no, we don't have throwing. So what we'll do is we'll focus on throwing first, and then we can do catching. And then we can actually start adding to the object type what actually gets put into the error object, because we can put lots of stuff into it, but it actually doesn't change the mechanics so much. That's mostly for debugging and for decoration almost. So actually we can test a lot with just this. Well, once we have support for throwing. So let's add in a new keyword. Where will that go? I guess I'll put the keywords here. And it should be a fairly simple construct. It'll be a statement, not an expression. Now it's worth considering whether, so considering the fact that we're using a keyword for throw, should we use a keyword for catch? And I like the shall we say mirroring of that. I think there are a lot of constructs in this language that are quite complementary in terms of you use this mechanism in one place and it applies in other places in somewhat predictable ways. So I feel like if you have the throw keyword, then it makes sense that you'd have a throw or a catch keyword. But actually, there's two types of catches here, and you're also going to be catching a lot more. Actually, that's a good point. Are you going to be catching as often as you're throwing? Now, the other point about it is, yeah, so you're probably actually, I'm not sure, maybe you'll be throwing more often. But the other point to consider is when you throw, that's basically going to be the only thing happening on that line. Whereas the mechanism with catching is such that it's an operator effectively. So it's happening on a line that could already be busy in terms of there might be, in particular on the right hand side. I'm not sure. I feel like there's just more clarity in the operator version though. I'd love to make them complementary and match, but I think that that might not be the correct call here. So I'm actually going to just document it here. So that I can document that design decision later. So throw keyword versus question mark operator rather than question mark, or rather than catch keyword. A catch postfix operator like await in Rust. Yeah, that can make a lot of sense too. Yeah, it's just its own syntax. Now, typically, and this is not an issue I have with Rust, but I suppose a consideration. I'm not sure why that swapped over, but a consideration I have with the Rust approach is that having the operator, in particular the bang operator at the end of the line, I feel could make it hidden. And like if a line is already noisy, and I feel like Rust line, I do a lot of line breaks in my Rust programs just because I think they can get very noisy. Rust has a lot of special syntaxes and can be a little operator heavy. So I feel like putting a bang at the line, it's not bad. And I think, I mean, once you're used to it, it probably reads quite naturally. But when, like, I don't write Rust all the time, so when I come back, it's a little bit of an adjustment to get used to reading that again. So I that's kind of one of the reasons I was thinking of putting question mark at the front, because I think it draws a little more attention to it. But yeah, it's a good point. You could have both approaches, both an operator and a keyword. Yeah, I'll probably start off with the operator version and see how I go with that. Because yeah, all of these things are modifiable in general. I wouldn't say that the language is going to be set in stone anytime soon, but it's going to be, evolving naturally. So let's see, we have a throw statement here, and it will take an expression. Because the need of adding parentheses, postfix flows more naturally. I'm not fully sure what you mean in terms of needing to add parentheses with await. Yeah. Do you have more context on that? I'd be interested to find out more about what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean when you're chaining them. Yeah, that's a fair point. I suppose that is one thing that not necessarily is less of an issue in this language, but this language would borrow a good bit from Go, where in that kind of a situation, I would say the language kind of forces you to take almost a more verbose approach for the sake of clarity, even though there isn't a lot of complexity in a line like that. Yeah, the language here would encourage you to split that up into multiple lines, because in a way multiple things are happening. But yeah, it's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered that kind of angle to it before. And that is like, I do like the option of chaining things, and that's why I haven't used many languages with a pipe operator. So not the pipe operator from Bash, but the actual pipe arrow operator from the likes of different functional languages, and I think is it maybe F sharp and other languages like that that allow you to turn things into a postfix syntax so that you can actually chain them and get out of the mm, prefix parentheses requirement. That's interesting. I hadn't really considered that approach for it. So let's see. This is saying that I need to handle. Yeah, well, this is what I wanted to do next anyway, which is handle it in the evaluation. So let's see, return. And this will be kind of neat, I think, because we're now, for the first time, allowing an error to bubble up through the result chain. Because at the moment, no, so that's an escape. How is result defined at the moment? And how are errors defined at the moment? Because the language does allow for language errors. So how are they being handled at the moment? Let's see, stack trace. How are stack trace? Because I think the language does have stack traces. Yeah, stack trace. And how is this implemented? I'm not sure how best to find this. I suppose, yeah, the call evaluation is probably a good place to start because it's when it bubbles up through a function layer that the next stack frame, so to speak, is going to get added to the stack trace. In Rust, this would be fetch await. Yeah, and yeah, because that's the thing. A lot of languages do have you do things. Well, I think the Java approach and the try catch approach is like they are done more globally, but I think that's usually not a best practice the way I see it. I think the way that Go and like the default Rust approach, where you're passing error results directly to the caller, is a bit like you can make a try catch more narrow, but it's just more cumbersome. And that's actually one of the reasons I was looking at an approach that's a little more similar to the Go style, but is even hopefully a little more lightweight again. But yeah, because it depends on. Yeah, it's a good point because I guess if the intention is to focus on the happy path, then you can make your line a bit longer if you don't want to handle like the interim errors. I don't know. I've some syntax sugar ideas for for making the Go approach a little more lightweight again. But yeah, like I say, I hadn't really considered the option of chaining things in that way. So that's definitely worth considering, I think. So let's see. Where do errors get handled? So for example, we have an argnum mismatch here. If that bubbles up, at what point does it get decorated with maybe it's that eval func call failed, which I think makes my job right now. Yeah, so at the moment what's happening is once the error gets up to the top, we're keeping the entire debug stack, but we need to add in some extra functionality to this. And so how does eval error to stack trace? Oh, all of them have eval error to stack trace. And that's what this function is. So it'll go through the entire, shall we say, debug stack and pull out the notable lines, i.e. wherever it crosses a function threshold. So how do we want to handle this? So not in eval anymore. Oh no, I am. I just hadn't written throw yet. So this is going to be an expression. Oh no, that's not the right return. It'll be here. And we will want to return error. And to start off with, we'll just have runtime error or user defined error. We're probably going to have to update all the all the existing error implementation or error throws, if they are going to be language errors. Well, I can do that in a dedicated PR or a dedicated change. Doesn't need to be part of all this at the moment. Something like this could be useful. Let's take a look. More syntactic sugar. I'm curious about this. What I might do is, I suppose I'll keep on the flow I'm at, but I'm curious to see that later. I'm going to save it in a notepad here. Thank you. So user-defined error, and it's going to have to evaluate two, oops. Eval expression to int. And so we're going to do something similar. We're going to eval expression to error object. And so we're going to have line and column. How are errors defined here? Yeah, they can have any fields that I like. So when we do a throw, we're gonna take the error. So there will always be an error name at the very least. So the error object will have a name. So let's revisit the definition of an error object. So that'll always be present on the AST. This may be optional, or this is optional, but it's also on the AST. Sources is optional on the AST. Context is optional on the AST. And then stack is not on AST. So to start with, we'll include the so we'll just have the object, the line and column. And the thing is, if a string on its own is provided to throw, then that is that is put into an object, and then the rest of the object is populated as normal. So what does that look like? So first of all, we're going to, I guess, create a new object. Like this, I guess. And where the value is defined. What was the syntax for populating a B tree? This guy. So I don't need the arc, but I do need, and I don't need mutex, but I need the rest of the bits. So the expression is going to be a what? It needs to evaluate to either a string or an object. Now this will be the first essentially polymorphic operator. Well, no, some of the other operators are polymorphic as well. So plus, for example, it can take two strings or it can take two integers. So this isn't the first, so I don't have to worry about breaking a convention. So yeah, in terms of this, where do we start? Yeah, I suppose we'll worry about the string case later. So we'll evaluate expression to error object. So this should be an object. So let's see. What file is that in? Value object. And that will be, okay, so that's a little more complicated because it's an object reference. How are objects handled elsewhere? Okay, so we have ref props. The description. So we'll have a new line here. We'll have the object eval expression. Context. Oops. Scopes, description, and expression. And then if that fails, then we'll do, let's see. Eval throw expression failed. But we'll probably need more error conditions along here. So let's see. Context, scopes, description. Let's have some examples of what other descriptions are like. No, that doesn't have a description. This one does, so it's an index. We can just do error object here and remove description. And then we'll also want to validate the properties of the object, because that's an interesting thing, that it'll be possible to define your own error object manually. So again, to allow these things to be composable properly and allow the user to have more control, ideally the language shouldn't be able to do things that the user can't do manually in a way. So for example, in theory, if throw like adds a special field to an object, which it will be doing, ideally the user should be able to actually do the same thing. And for example, if the user really wanted to, they can mess up the call stack. Not that that's desirable, but you might have a framework that wants to be able to have a little more control and flexibility in how it gets used. And so, what's a scenario that could be useful? So for example, we know from the likes of Java projects where you're using Spring or something and you get an error, and there's just so many stacks of errors from the different frameworks and stuff like that. Maybe there's a utility there where the framework can actually not remove entirely, but can put to the side the full error stack and then just present you with like a tidier error stack that's just relevant for you. And so I think, or even just like giving the user more flexibility in how they construct things, that syntax sugar will take care of them, or that the language will do some automatic stuff around. But we'll see more about what I mean later. But to get started, we'll go ahead. Oh no, it does. It actually also goes in error objects. No, sorry, we're modifying throws right now. And so what we want to do here is, I lost my train of thought. So we're creating an error object with props. We want to make sure that they're of the correct type. We want to see what happens when we throw an object, when we create an object, when we evaluate an expression to an error object. And so this is also for when, like, this style of function is for when we want to actually get access to the item inside the expression, but we don't actually, do we care too much about what it is here? Well, actually, yes, we do, in the sense that we want access to the properties so that we can use them for populating the next step of the function. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to be happening at this layer. So we'll need to tackle it one at a time. So first of all, we'll want, let me open up the Scratch file. First, what we want to do is validate the error object. And it has a name property. And the value of name property is a string. And then if it has function property, then the value of function property is a function. And so whether we want to do that in here, so we'll have validation, and then we'll also have the next step of chain. And what's that going to do? Well, that's going to construct, well, no, sorry, it's not going to construct a new error object. It's going to check the stack property. And we don't need to do this now, actually. So actually, all we really need to do is just do the name. And we'll assume that it has a function property right now because we haven't added in the functionality for string checking. And do we want to validate that here? Or do we want to return the object properties and validate them in the caller? So maybe not assert. What can we call this? So we could call it because we probably don't need to return the values, the property values of this object, because that will require copying them out of that arc mutex, which, you know, we don't really need to. So Now, assert, I feel, is kind of a loaded term in the sense that it'll be different to like assert functionality in general, which are almost like debugging statements that we put throughout our code. It's also different to how a lot of like I tend to avoid validation functions as well because I try to follow that the principle of parse don't validate. But I think in this case validate probably makes I guess it is an assertion. So let's go with this. And so we'll want and what's if I go rust get and that returns an option. Yeah, that makes sense. So and then so if that isn't found, then we'll throw an invalid error object. Error. Let's see. And so the issue will be what? So we'll have a description here about exactly what was wrong. Now, I don't love the way that looks, but I have a feeling that The Rust, is it Clippy? Will hopefully give us some suggestions on how to improve that. So we'll get the name. And then yeah, we have a valid expression to string. And we're not actually going to use the result of this. Let's see where we are so far in terms of this. Yeah, because I need to do some more here, some more work. But overall, we're probably at the point where it should at least compile. And the fact that it's not means that we've some work that we can do. We've got a lot of errors. No, I'm looking at prior run. Let's see. This should be an easy enough one to resolve. Yeah, I just need a new one of these. Oh, we do actually need to return. Oh yeah, we need to evaluate the expression to the object so that we can actually throw it here. So did I not? call it that. Oh, I called it assert error object. But we'll actually call it eval expression to error object, and it'll return, I guess, an object. Let's see, where's value? An object ref, I guess. And we'll want to I'm not sure how to handle it down here. Now we won't define what the user defined error actually looks like. We'll handle that separately. So I think this will need to be an object ref. I think we've imported that now already. Oh no, we haven't. And I'm not sure we need the line and column there, because the user defined error is going to start having a stack trace in it. Yeah, the line and column is only for specific specific constructs. Yeah, I think that's mostly for debugging purposes. I don't think we need it here. Uh, wait, we will need it on the AST item, but just not, we won't need to put it into the user defined error because it's going to be in the error object. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this should be a statement. Too concerned about the mutability here. Okay, I'll need to do some extra handling of the property to get the name out of it. Oh, I don't need that. Let's see where that gets us. How about this? I don't think I can return a reference like that. Yeah, it would need to be something like that. If that's possible. Okay, so how do I handle the dereferencing of that object for the duration of that scope? Oh yeah, that was the test I wanted to do. But I guess it's a in the set of runtime errors. I probably want to sets. Oh, that's not meant to be there. How long has that been there? Well, what I'll do is I'll move it to the top of the file and it'll show up in my Git status anyway when I continue working on this. So I do probably want to start splitting this runtime errors file into separate files because there's lots of categories of runtime errors now, so it'd be nice to associate them back to the groups that they're associated with. So let's see, immutable assignment. Oh yeah. Throw no name error. And this will be something like error object has no name. Oh, that has to be inside a file treated like a comment. And yes, so how do I get access to this mutable variable? Do I just do something like that? This is B-tree map, right? Maybe there is other examples in the file. Oh, maybe lock deref. Yeah, that looks like it's exactly what I'm looking for. And so I should have, well, yeah, that's one problem. And maybe this should work now. Oops, that shouldn't be props val, that should be props. Expected raw expression. Well, maybe we can just comment that out for now. Can't move out of props, which is behind shared ref. Can I just do that? Oh, but yeah, I don't want to clone the object, but I'm cloning the arc ref. Okay, let's see. So eval throw expression failed. It doesn't. I guess that's just because there's no handler for it in main. So by default, everything that gets caught properly gets turned into a stack trace. And if it isn't handled, then it just says the raw error. Eval throw expression failed. Yeah, and those don't have anything associated with them. So and I actually get to catch a bug that was missing. But again, I will okay, and that looks more in line with what we want to see. So in this case, it's coming from line 1, column 7, and what's there? So yeah, it's coming from this object, and it says error object has no, oh no, invalid error object doesn't contain name property. Yeah, so do I want to split that error message into 2 errors? Or and do I want to have a message per? Do I want to handle all these different cases with a different string each, or do I want to handle them with a different variant? Maybe I actually do it like this. And I'm not sure that that file saved properly. Oh, no. It's just that I'm providing an extra field and not using it. Oh, this is an issue with the new object formatting that I defined. Oh, because it used to be a runtime error to I need to move this somewhere else. Oh no, I won't need to. Well, no, that should still be an error. You can't call a string as a function. What does it say now? Oh, it's just that the error line has changed. That's just debugging stuff. Oops, wrong place. Line 18, not column 18. Okay, so that is in, I think, a good place to pause for the moment. We can, what have we done? We've added in the initial throw validation at least, but we haven't actually implemented throw yet, so there isn't much to test here. So I don't think I'll do a commit right now. What I'll probably do is follow up later, and well, we'll see. We have some, yeah, we've added an error test, so maybe we do actually do a commit. And we'll get rid of the location for now, at least just in the ASTN parser. So that we can, like, we can add that back in later. Yeah, I'm not using user-defined error yet. Oh, well, I kind of am. I'm just not handling it yet. Yeah, maybe we'll just call this error.userDefined. I'll just say that for now. need to fix those parse errors actually. Put them back in place and make sure that they pass the tests. And so what is the issue there? Oh, just the ordering, like I was saying. Maybe I unstage the... Oh, there's some changes from this commit that are missing. And what was I going to call this? Oh yeah. So add throw keyword and validation. Maybe initial validation. And I'll just stash the local changes, the ones that change the order of the cases in the match statements, just to see if that makes a difference to the running of the tests. No. Well, I'll come back to it. And I'll revert the changes I did in the other files to prepare them for the commit. And so I think that is... Oh, and I'll also need to change the version for when this gets merged back into main. But I think that wraps us up nicely for today. Maybe didn't get quite as much done as I had necessarily planned, but at the same time, I think I very much overestimated what I was going to get done in this session just because I really had prepared a lot of work for this error handling and error throwing implementation. So I'm looking forward to actually getting stuck into it more and seeing where that brings us, because I do think it's a nice mechanism. I think it'll look and feel very good to write and to work with. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I mean, I think I need to, take a bit of a break, eat some stuff, and come back to it. But because I can feel my not energy levels, but my focus waning just a little bit. And so I'm looking forward to getting stuck back in. I wish I could continue now because I think it is really nice and it's, coming along fairly smoothly. So I'd love to keep going, but no, I do need to take a break. So thanks everyone as always for checking in, joining in, chatting, and checking out the project. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again, hopefully very soon. Bye.